Guys, I didn't want him to go. I didn't want any of them to go, but I didn't want Matt Smith to go in particular. Oh well, I guess it's time for the Doctor Who Top 10 11th Doctor Stories ranking. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome, as I said in the pre-title scene, welcome to my Doctor Who Top 10 11th Doctor Stories ranking. In this ranking, I will be ranking my top 10 11th Doctor television stories. This is just television stories. This is the same for every single Doctor, by the way. Television stories or moments. Expanded media comes under, will be dealt with separately, like all these books, comics, etc. They'll be dealt differently. We're focusing on TV when it comes to these main rankings, as that's the main era. It's the show. Although, mind you, if we had movies that fitted into the canon, they would also be counted. So it's time for the 11th Doctor's top 10 stories, and the 11th Doctor, as you may be aware by now, is my favourite Doctor. He is just absolutely amazing. Matt Smith is amazing. I feel like there is a perception of the 11th Doctor that he's a very wacky, childish-like character. But I think that's more of a perception that the audience has given him rather than what we get on screen. Yeah, he can be quite childish and silly in places, but he's also really dark and mysterious in other times. In fact, in his early series 5, he got crossed very easily. Look at Victory of the Daleks and Flesh and Stone for good examples. But yeah, and in Name of the Doctor, there was literally a scene where he broke down hearing the news about Trenzalore. And Time of the Doctor, he knew he was going to die, but he stayed on Trenzalore anyway because he wasn't going down without a fight. Possibly making the 11th Doctor the most heroic incarnation in terms of saving lots of people that he doesn't really know. So, in honour of my favourite Doctor, I know he's not going to be everybody's taste, although he is probably one of the more popular ones overall, possibly the third after the 4th and the 10th. Although those two are kind of fighting out for first place, so any other Doctor is going to come out third onwards. But in honour of my personal favourite Doctor, his top 10 television stories, and honestly, he has had a kind of a rocky, bumpy, turbulent era, but there are still plenty of gems in this era. But before we get to any of those, here are the honourable and dishonourable mentions. First, dishonourable mentions. Now, I will say that the 11th Doctor's era was the first era of the new series that I personally had. There were some stories that I didn't like. I liked all of the stories of the Russell T Davies era, even Fear Her. I liked them all. Well, levels of which depended on the stories. 5 out of 10 was the lowest I went with a new series story, until series 6, when the first two stories that went lower than 5 out of 10 scores, and the first two rants came along. And then we got two more in Series 7, and it's the first of those two Series 7 ones that I will be nominating as my dishonourable mention. The worst episode of the new series as of the end of the 11th Doctor's era, although there is going to be stiff competition from sometime in the 12th Doctor's era. But until then, this is my least favourite new series story and my least favourite Doctor Who story since Season 24's Time in the Rani. Funny enough, this is also, like that story, it's a season opener. Series 7, or Season 33's series opener, Asylum of the Daleks. Now, I've already gone into lots of detail about why this episode is awful in my review, and I've also touched upon it in my Series 7 ranking, although not an awful lot. So do check out the review for more thoughts and more details. Let's try and do a brief one. Positives. Matt Smith continues to be amazing. He never puts a foot wrong in any of his episodes. And I also like Jenna Coleman as Oswin. The character is sassy and witty, but you know, she's got at least got some personality, which is more than that could be said for Clara in Series 7 Part 2. And Jenna Coleman does a really great job in the role. Between this, The Snowmen, and The Bells of St. John, I can see why she was cast. And also Nick Curran does a great job in the direction, and Murray Gold with the music. And the production does look really good. And there's some good editing in there, I suppose. Okay, but most of the problems with the story fall flat thanks to the script, the story, the plot. Stephen Moffat has just completely lost it with this story. First of all, it's supposed to be a Dalek story, but we don't really do an awful lot with the Daleks themselves. There is a lot of plot holes and problems concerning the Dalek Asylum, such as the way to turn off the shields of the Dalek Asylum are from the inside of the asylum, which is basically giving prisoners the keys to their own cells. And the Daleks up above can't destroy the asylum because the shield is on. And they're afraid to go down. And then the Doctor later says, "Daleks, I don't scared isn't Dalek," when he's talking to Amy. Further still, the asylum exists because Daleks don't think it's offensive to kill creatures of such beauty. This wouldn't be such a bad idea if it wasn't for the fact that this contradicts all of the previous 48 years, or nearly 49 at that point, of Daleks killing each other. Look at the evil of the Daleks. Look at Resurrection of the Daleks. Look at Revelation of the Daleks. Look at Remembrance of the Daleks. Look at Victory of the Daleks only a few years earlier. Daleks killing Daleks isn't common. Heck, I think there was even a Daleks shot a Dalek casing in the first Dalek story when they believed and the intruders were in there. They definitely did it in the film adaptation, Doctor and the Daleks. So, yeah, Daleks killing Daleks isn't new. In fact, it's theoretically been around since their first story, if not certainly since the last 60s Dalek story. Planet of the Daleks, there was one Dalek killed by the Supreme Council Dalek in that story. So, yeah, and then at the end of this story, the other Daleks blow up the asylum anyway. So, yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But the worst thing about this story is the absolutely offensive Amy and Rory divorce subplot. This is offensive for the characters. It's offensive for the audience who cared about these characters, and it's just awful. They have an argument off screen. They're ready to divorce. They had no time to even talk about it. And if Pond Life's anything to imply, then this has literally only been a month since they split up. And the reason is Amy can't have children. And they say something happened at Demon's Run to cause her to not have any more children besides Melody Pond, aka River Song. And then they literally just fix everything within a few minutes of actually talking about it. And the Doctor leaving Amy this wristband to combat this nano cloud things that turns people into Dalek puppets, and the Dalek puppets themselves aren't that necessary, but whatever. We'll just this episode is awful. This episode is absolutely terrible, and in the case of the Amy Rory subplot, offensive. You know what? I think this story is actually worse than Time the Rani. Time the Rani is bad, but it's not offensive. Well, I don't find it offensive. It's boring. It's terrible, but at least it wasn't offensive. At least to me, anyway. I mean, disagree if you like. Fair enough. I mean, it's not. It is a very unpopular story, and I completely understand why. But I would. Maybe it's offensive in the case of it's a offensive start for the 7th Doctor. But at least with him, it's his first story, and he's got the remaining 11 stories and further stories in expanded media, as well as his appearances in Dimensions in Time in the TV movie, to fix that. Asylum of the Daleks is the 5th to last Amy and Rory television story. 5th to last. I mean, I was ready to give up on those two after that episode. It's only thanks to Series 7 Part 1's remaining 4 episodes that I actually cared about them again, especially the Chris Chibnall 2. In Asylum of the Daleks, this is the one time I did not like Amy and Rory, or at least certainly one time I did not like a companion since Mel. And in that case, that was due to her being annoying. But she didn't make any decisions or actions that would make me hate her. She was just very annoying. But in terms of decision making, Amy and Rory just kind of cause them, they just dig themselves a hole that the Doctor, and then the Doctor gives them a ladder to climb out of when they're ready. Oh, it's It's terrible. It's terrible. This is the worst episode of Matt Smith's era, and it's easily the worst episode of the new series so far, and the worst episode since Time in the Rani. Possibly even worse than that. To say this story is worse than Time in the Rani means I'm actually giving that story. Thankfully, Series 7's finale was much better, and that is my honourable mention, The Name of the Doctor from Series 7, aka Season 33. This is a great finale. It's not as good as the Series 5 one or the Russell T Davies ones, but I think it's still a pretty great finale. I think it's got some really great stuff going for it. Matt Smith, absolutely amazing as the Doctor, and I like the bit where he actually breaks down. He shows he's actually scared about what's going to happen, but he goes to Trenzalore anyway to save his friends, because that's what the Doctor does. He is a good man. No matter how many times the 12th Doctor may try to question himself, he is a good man, whether he likes it or not, as the 6th Doctor might put it. And he was a good man too, underneath it all. Don't forget that. Clara's actually pretty good in this story. It's been a while since she was... I mean, she was alright in the previous episodes. Not so much Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS, to be honest. But she was alright in previous episodes since The Rings of Akaten. But I think this is her best story since then, and she's pretty good. Personality-wise, she still needs to develop a little bit more. Bastard, Jenny, and Strax are great, although Strax, this is probably my least favourite outing for him, because this is probably his most annoying. This or Deep Breath. And why the heck do they kill off Jenny? But besides that, it's a pretty good story. Richard D. Grant's pretty good as the Great Intelligence, and it's really interesting that he tries to sabotage the Doctor's life by going into his time stream, causing lots of problems. So, yeah, I think there's merit to The Name of the Doctor. It's not perfect, but I think it's a pretty great series finale. Okay, on to the top 10 properly. I'll try not to talk about these too much, as I've already spent a lot of time talking about the honourable and dishonourable mentions. Okay, starting off with number 10. Out of my top 10, 9 of these stories are 10 out of 10s. There are 9 10 out of 10 11th Doctor stories, so I had to pick my favourite 9 out of 10 to end up as the 10th spot on this list. And I have chosen Amy's Choice from Series 5A, aka Season 31. This is a beautiful, character-driven story that has some of the best performances of Karen Gillan and Arthur Darvill as Amy Pond and Rory Williams, although their best performance is still yet to come. And Matt Smith being absolutely brilliant as per usual. We also have Toby Jones really brilliant, being really brilliant as the Dream Lord, a great villain in this story. And I like the dream sequence story of they have to choose they've got 2 dreams and they have to choose which one is real. The twist turns out to be they're both dreams, but it's such a really great concept and idea. It's so good. I'm surprised Simon Nye didn't write for the show again after this one, considering he'd written such a great script. I could say the same thing for the other new guest writer for Series 5. They wouldn't write for the show again, or at least not yet. And I'll get to his story later. But yeah, this is a really great story, and considering it looks more like a budget-saving episode, it's certainly a really effective one. Moving on to number 9, the first of the 9 10 out of 10 11th Doctor stories. 9, 10, 11. But yeah, this one, unlike Amy's Choice, which is a fairly popular story, this story, on the other hand, doesn't really get much love. In fact, it's not very popular at all. The Rings of Akaten from Series 7, aka Season 33. I really like this one. I think this is a absolutely beautiful and emotionally brilliant story. Some amazing performances, especially Amelia Jones as Mary Gillell, and Matt Smith doing his best speech that he's done. This is also Clara's best episode personality-wise, and one of Jenna Coleman's best performance ones in Series 7 Part 1. Is it Part 2? Sorry, Series 7 Part 2. Clara might get a bit more personality in Series 8, but in terms of Series 7, this is modern Clara at her best in this episode. It's like Neil Gaiman got Clara, or at least he was the one who was able to write her best. It wasn't as great with Hyde, but it still was better than some of the other stories between Rings of Akaten and The Name of the Doctor in terms of Clara. So, yeah, I think he got her best in that half of the series. Now, understanding people aren't so keen on this episode, I've actually got someone who has actually explained why they're not so keen on this one. And I've also heard someone else's opinions at some point. But besides them, those two people, one in a comment and one in a video they've done a while back. Besides them, I honestly don't know why people aren't so keen on this story. Apart from the one person who's actually told me why they're not so keen on it. And even then, that it's a not too keen on as opposed to a hating. So yeah, I don't get it. Why did this episode end up being the ninth least popular story in the 50th anniversary Doctor Who stories poll in Doctor Who magazine in 2014? How did this one end up being ninth to last and the second least popular new series story? I mean, fair enough if you don't rate it very high, but there must have been a lot of low scores in order to get it ninth last. So I don't really get why. Hopefully, it's gotten a bit more of a popular response in later years. Okay, moving on to number 8, another Series 7, aka Season 33 episode, my favourite of the series, and that is The Crimson Horror. Or The Crimson Horror, as the Mork guy would say. Now, I think that character would have been a bit of an annoying character if it wasn't for the fact they cast a really great actor into that role. The way he says the Crimson Horror is just so great that I just love it. The rest of the story is also really great. Vastra and Jenny and Strax, it's probably their best episode. And, well, definitely for Jenny, being used, she gets to do some stuff for about a quarter of an hour before the Doctor turns up, and it's great to have the Paternoster gang going out on their own for a bit, and then they team up with the Doctor later on to battle a deliciously amazing Dame Diana Rigg as our main villain. Oh, it's absolutely wonderful. This is a honest to god underrated gem, and it's not really one that gets much recognition. In fact, I think out of all the Series 7 episodes, not just Part 2, but Series 7 overall, this is the one that's least remembered. But I don't know why. It's a great story. It's a great episode. I really like it. So hopefully you'll be able to enjoy it. Even if it's not the same levels, but hopefully you'll be able to enjoy it. Um, Moving on to number 7. We're into Series 6 territory now, Season 32. And we start off with a very popular story in the fan base of this era. And this is probably Amy and Rory's best story and their character, the best story for their characters at least, and Carrington and Arthur Darvill for performers. The Girl Who Waited. This is a brilliantly scripted story, a great character-driven story for our companions. It's also a nicely executed story. It's some nice locations, even though it does look like part of the story is filmed in a blank white room or in a dirty engine room. But even they look pretty great when shot by director Nick Hurren, and the script by Tom McRae is amazing. Brilliant dialogue, brilliant character interactions. It's it's just absolutely wonderful. Number 6. This is another Series 6, Season 32 story, and I think had this been the series finale, it would have been one of the best series finales. It wasn't the series finale, but it was in fact the mid-series finale when the series went from part 1, end of part 1, and then took a break before start of part 2. This is A Good Man Goes to War. Now, this one wraps up Series 6 Part 1 really well in a really great fashion. Brilliant story, brilliant characters, brilliant interaction, such really great stuff going on. There isn't really an episode like it. It's quite unique in its sense. Um, and yeah, it's got some really great stuff in it, some great interactions. And this is another example of the 11th Doctor showing off his darker cross side in places. It's also a great character story for Amy and Rory, and the supporting characters are also really great. Moving on to number 5, the best Matt Smith's era series finale from Series 5, this time round, Season 31, The Pandorica Opens and The Big Bang. What an epic climax. What an exciting ending. And unlike the Russell T Davies finales, it proved that it didn't have to go bigger and bigger and bigger just to be super epic. It could go super big in the first half before becoming more of a character drama in the second. It could be it could go as high as it can, but then because it goes so high, it decides to go low for a little bit. But that's okay. With character writing and character drama this good, that works to its advantage. That is brilliant. But it also means you don't have to have a cop-out ending, unlike lots of the Time Lords in Journey's End do. But instead, we got a pretty well structured ending. It's a really well put together one, and it's really interesting. And it's a great character building one. Series 5 is the best of the Matt Smith era series, and it's one of my favourites of the new series overall, and probably one of my favourite series overall in classic and new series. Series 7, on the other hand, sadly, is the weakest Matt Smith one and would come lower on the overall series, and it certainly would be on the new series ones. And it's one of my least favourite new series ones, and one of my least favourite overall. And then Series 6 would come halfway on all three of those lists. Well, halfway-ish on the new series rankings and overall rankings. It'd come halfway-ish. But Pandora opens Big Bang, fantastic finale to Series 5. And it pretty much wraps up that entire series arc, bar a few things left open for future series. And I think out of the Smith finales, it's probably the one that wraps up its arcs the best, although Time of the Doctor does wrap up the Doctor story arc in a nice tribute to the 11th Doctor. But in terms of actually wrapping up the story arcs, I think the Pandora opens and the Big Bang is the best one to do it. And sticking with Series 5, moving on to number 4, the best series opener for a new series, and the best opener for any Doctor, although not the best series opener ever for the entire show. There's some classic stories I prefer over it, like Tomb of the Cybermen and Remembrance of the Daleks. And this is for the proper series, only not the special ones, because then again, another story that's coming up later will also be mentioned. But in terms of the series, this is the best series opener for the new series, and it's the best first story for a Doctor in the show. That's right, even better than Spearhead from Space. From Series 5, Season 31, The 11th Hour. This is a cracking start to the 11th Doctor's era and the Stephen Moffat era. It's probably the one that probably put, after Russell T Davies's left, it probably put most fans on ease that Stephen Moffat knew what he was doing with the show. Well, for now at least. And for now, he was kind of in great control. It was a great script. It was a great start. And like I said, Series 5 was great. So Stephen Moffat was clearly doing something right at the start. But where it went afterwards is where we then come into question. But as for the first episode of the era, it's a masterpiece. It's absolutely brilliant. Yeah, there is a bit of a slow bit in it, but I think the slowness helps build up the story really well, and it's still a fun, enjoyable episode. So, yeah, it's a really interesting one. I think this is probably Rory's weakest in terms of a character, apart from the Sign of the Daleks, obviously. But even then, he's still pretty good. And of course, he's got plenty more time to develop afterwards. So yeah, it's a great episode. Really love it. On to top 3 territory now, with number 3, the best episode of Series 6, Season 32, in my opinion, and the best of the 2 Neil Gaiman written episodes that he did for the show, The Doctor's Wife. This is a brilliant episode. This is absolutely amazing. Starters, Neil Gaiman has the balls to try and trick the audience to think the Time Lords, or some Time Lords, have survived, only to then reveal that it was recorded messages that would then lure Time Lords to house in this bubble universe, and who would then eat the TARDISes, and the Time Lords would then be killed, and parts of their bodies would be given to patchwork people, auntie and uncle. That is genius. Neil Gaiman had balls for doing that. Secondly, great character interactions between the Doctor and the TARDIS in human form when it was placed into the body of another character called Idris. And also, great use of the TARDIS set whilst using the same use of corridors, but with a proper reason, as opposed to Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS and The Invasion of Time, where it looks quite boring, just the same corridors and not much use in the other rooms, and the ones that we do get aren't that interesting anyway, and we only glimpse at rooms that are much are more interesting, but we don't go in them. Well, that's Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS. Invasion of Time is a little bit better. We get to go in some rooms that are a bit better. But yeah, this story at least has a reason for why we don't go into where we're stuck in these corridors and don't go into any other rooms besides the 10th Doctor's TARDIS console room. But yeah, it's Michael Sheen, by the way, is great as House. Brilliant stuff. So overall, The Doctor's Wife is a amazing story. Moving on to number 2, the best episode of Series 5, in my opinion. Oh, but Nick, if number 2 is the best episode of Series 5, and you've already done the best episodes of Series 6 and 7, what could possibly be number 1? I'll tell you once we've done number 2. Okay, so number 2, the best episode of Series 5, Season 31, is an episode Sidney Newman, original creator of Doctor Who, would be proud of. Written by the other guest writer of Doctor Who Series 5, Richard Curtis, who has also yet to return, for reasons I'm not sure why. Vincent and the Doctor. This is a beautiful episode where the Doctor and Amy travel back in time to meet Vincent van Gogh and help him stop a monster, which in this story is the physical representation of Vincent van Gogh's depression and illness that he has. The monster is an invisible monster, just like depression, just like mental illness. And Vincent has to fight the monster. He's the only one who can see it, and he has to fight it, just like his own depression and mental illness. And he gets help from the only doctor who's ever helped him, the Time Lord, known only as the Doctor, and his companion Amy Pond being the one person he's fallen in love with, sort of. I'm not sure how much of a romantic Vincent van Gogh was, but in this story, he certainly finds two people who have helped him get better, even if not for very long. He's not very well liked back when he was alive. People don't like him. He was depressed, so because people didn't like his artwork, but he loved it. He saw colors that nobody else saw in normal life, and that's why he painted them. But ultimately, he got depressed over time, which caused him to drink more, and then that got him more sick, and the cycle kept going on. And then people liked him less and less, and they still don't like his paintings. They find them rubbish, even if the paintings got better over time. Perhaps if I'm not an art expert, but even if Vincent got better at painting, they still wouldn't have liked it, and so the cycle carries on, and ultimately we end up with the broken Vincent character that we have represented in this story, with only the his love for color and painting those colors and the visions he has being the thing that carries him on until the Doctor and Amy come along. And even with their intervention, they wouldn't save him from his final fate that took place in history, where he sadly ended his own life. But things could have gone even worse if the Doctor and Amy hadn't intervened, at least in the context of this story with the Crephaeus, which, like I said, is the physical representation of depression. And this episode, like Roses from Series 11, is a ballsy and brave episode in teaching a story about historical characters with a kind of a dark but adult theme through it. It's not adult theme like swearing, sex, violence, etc. It's a topic that adults would talk about, but children probably wouldn't understand until they're a bit older. Maybe when they become teenagers, they'd understand, but apart from feeling lonely, they probably wouldn't experience much of it. At least not to my knowledge. Maybe there are some, I'm not quite sure. But it's certainly a theme that adults would understand. It's definitely a topic they would get. And I think this story perfectly demonstrates that, using the use of a historical character and a pretty interesting monster. In fact, the monster itself is still pretty interesting. So, Vincent and the Doctor, such a beautiful episode and such a brave, bold episode. And it's pretty interesting to see it's by a writer who usually does comedy, but he also does drama really well. He also would go on to write the adaptation of Warhorse, the film adaptation that Steven Spielberg directed 2 years later. So he definitely does drama really well, and naturally he does romantic comedy. So yeah, he's definitely done a great job with writing a powerful drama for Doctor Who, and he did it with flying colours. So, Number 2 was quite a hard-hitting story, wasn't it? I hope number 1's a more fun story then. How about the 50th anniversary special? That's right, we're celebrating Doctor Who's golden anniversary, its golden year, golden anniversary year, with my personal favourite episode ever made so far, The Day of the Doctor from the 2013 specials. This episode is outstanding. First of all, fantastic direction by Nick Curran. Second of all, John Hurt. John Hurt. Thirdly, script, honestly, brilliant by Stephen Moffat. Absolutely brilliant. Fourthly, David Tennant slips back into the role of the 10th Doctor. It's like he's never left, just like Patrick Troughton did when he returned for the show. Matt Smith, outstanding as per usual. Billy Piper, great as the moment, and I like Stephen Moffat going down the Bad Wolf angle rather than Rose Tyler. Clara is better than most of in Series 7 Part 2, although she's still got a bit to go. But Jenna Coleman does a great job. Unit characters are great, although I think Osgood is at her weakest here, but she will get better in her Capaldi era appearances. Zygons are great, they make a great return. Time War stuff, amazing. I think this is only the second on-screen case of the Time War after the end of time. Looks great. Yeah, it does look like an ordinary space war, but for this story, that's fine. It still looks really great, and the Daleks are awesome. And yeah, this is just an amazing story. Just really well put together. I loved it. Yeah, I've got a few nitpicks in here, but you know what? Sod it. This is an amazing episode. I love The Day of the Doctor. I love it. And it's just absolutely spectacular, as the Master said in The End of Time. But yeah, masterpiece, in my opinion, masterful. So that's my ranking of my top 10 11th Doctor stories. So to recap the list: number 10, Amy's Choice; number 9, The Rings of Akaten; number 8, The Crimson Horror; number 7, The Girl Who Waited; number 6, A Good Man Goes to War; number 5, Pandora Opens and the Big Bang; number 4, The 11th Hour; number 3, The Doctor's Wife; number 2, Vincent and the Doctor; and number 1, The Day of the Doctor. By the way, I'm sorry if I took so long talking about the honourable and dishonourable mentions. So that's my top 10 11th Doctor stories ranking, and I would like to raise one last toast to Matt Smith to say thank you for being the 11th Doctor. You were fantastic, absolutely fantastic. So that's it from the 11th Doctor's era at long last. So next time, we will be moving on to the beginning of the 12th Doctor's era with Series 8, Episode 1, Deep Breath in the next review. Now, I've got a bit of an announcement here. For the 12th and 13th Doctor reviews, they're going to be on the Nicholas Payne main channel, the main one, or just simply Nicholas Payne. This is due to The Magician's Apprentice being the first episode in Series 9, being the first episode that aired where after I got on that channel started. So it would be one that I would do on that channel anyway from that story onwards. And I'll technically take it back to last Christmas for Series 9 starting with that one technically. Or, well, if we include the Christmas specials. But I've decided to do the entirety of the Peter Capaldi era on that channel just for consistency. And then Jodie Whittaker onwards as well. As well as also anything else that come out from September 2015 onwards. Which is why... and Doctor Six Doctor The Last Adventure was on this channel, although I slightly regret not putting on that one, but I kind of used the excuse that it was a July-August 2015 release as opposed to September onwards one. But yeah, I'll be putting September 2015 releases onwards for the expanded media stuff on that channel, unless they get a Universal's review. And stuff from before then being on this channel, with the exception of the Peter of Series 8 and Last Christmas, which will also be on the main channel for the full Peter Capaldi era being there. So the next Doctor Who reviews will be starting from Deep Breath onwards, will be on the Nicholas Payne main channel. Then again, if you're watching in the overall Doctor Who reviews playlist and the TV shows playlist, or you go to the 12th Doctor and 13th Doctor reviews playlist on this channel, then you can watch them there. Otherwise you'd have to go to the other channel, or those playlists. So subscribe to that channel for the upcoming Doctor Who reviews, and subscribe to the other channels for upcoming videos when they come out. And that doesn't mean that's the end of Doctor Who reviews on this channel. I've still got to do the TARDIS-sodes from Series 2 and the 11th Doctor minisodes, as well as any revisitations of previous stories. So it's not going to be the all-out end, but for story chronologically from the Unearthly Child to essentially the time in the Timeless Children, that's the end of it for the Retro channel with the Time of the Doctor, and the start on the main channel with Deep Breath. So yeah, but that doesn't mean it's the overall end. And of course there's going to be future ranking videos, of course, I've promised, coming later down the line. So do stick around. There will be future videos and future rankings related to Doctor Who on the Retro channel in the coming months, years, etc. But until then, and until the Series 8 reviews get started on the main channel, thank you for watching, and I shall see you guys next time. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel.